Is that loud enough?
You're good to go.
Okay. Soul sessions were the idea of Donald Jean Lewis of this center, who 2.5 years ago came to me with the idea of a conversation that would take place between me and another, not an interview, not a debate, but a conversation about that person's work in the world and its spiritual dimensions. And so it is my honor tonight to present the latest in this series of conversations, Cleopatra Williams, who, like I think all the others we've had before, is a member of this center. We haven't had to go too far and wide to find people that we didn't know or had no connection with who had really interesting stories and were doing really powerful work. They came to us. They came to this amazing place. And so tonight we're going to talk about her work, her history, her life, her vision, her dreams, her spirituality, and how you and I might learn from this and grow from this too, because we're going to see in her a lot of openings for ourselves, a lot of ways to deal with things in the world or overcome challenges or have the great commitment that it takes. So with that, I'd like to begin by thanking you for being here, Cleo.
Thank you for having me. I love this place.
I know you do, and it shows. And this is Cleo's Heartfelt Living project, which just was amazing, and I asked if she would bring it tonight, and she will share it with you and talk about it here in a little bit. So I was thinking how to get this started, because usually these things, they're a little stiff and awkward and weird at first, and then we get into it, we get rolling. Now you and I know each other pretty well, so this won't be an issue at all, but I thought, like, how do we lead off? And so what occurred to me was this question. You told us in class that you, when you were a little girl, like a toddler almost, you started dancing.
Yes.
And I think a lot of children dance, but they don't have a commitment to classical ballet. They don't have a commitment to do the work that you did and to train your body the way that you did to do that. What led you to the discipline and the commitment that you found?
My mom did. I mean, which is what I think parents are supposed to do, to watch your kids and see what they're naturally drawn to. And she did that. She saw that every time I heard music, I wanted to move. And that is of her. She was the same way. She danced while I was in her womb all the time.
Oh.
So it's that part of me, part of her. So she actually, my aunt worked at a school. So like when you're 3, they don't always have classes for kids. Some schools do. But I think I was 3 and they were putting me in class with older kids because my aunt taught art at that school and she had a friend that taught ballet there. It was like a summer school. So I would go and be a 3-year-old taking dance classes with these teenagers. Really just kind of like thinking I was doing something. But I think kids are amazing in that way, where really you put them around something, even if they're not doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, they're absorbing it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's really what it was giving me access. Seeing, oh, she likes music, she moves when she hears music, let me put her in a situation where that facilitates that. And it just went from there. After that, she had me audition for the inner city Nutcracker, where they would come into the urban neighborhoods and audition kids that normally couldn't afford to and didn't go to ballet schools to be in their Nutcracker. Well, I got in, and then I got a scholarship to that school for the year. And then it just kept going to where I became that Clara for that Nutcracker. And it wasn't the Houston Ballet, it was like another smaller school. But they would show that on like the PBS channel, the public access here. Yeah. So even as a kid, it was like, I think I was probably 10 and seeing myself on television. So from a very young age, it was, you have this skill, let me put you in it, and it was success came from that. So I'd be lying if I said at that age it felt like hard work. right? It really wasn't until it was like, okay, that you've grown and left that school. Do you want to go to Houston Ballet? Do you want to go to HSPDA? That 14-year-old time, high school, okay, you're taking this seriously. That's when it really started to be like, okay, now the commitment starts to come in. The rest of the time, it was fun. It was work because I would go after school, but it wasn't a conscious decision of commitment.
It started to get competitive around HSPVA time, auditioning, and very few make the cut.
Right, and so, and not to brag, but I was a freshman and got into the highest level of PVA. And you would think that that would be something that you're super excited about. But when you're a freshman and you're in classes with seniors who already have their cliques of people that they've gone through school with, right, for the past 3 years, and you're new, they're not always so embracing of you. So I really remember feeling like, okay, not everyone is your friend just because you're good, you know? So that was kind of that. And then Houston Ballet was like the real deal.
Yeah, that's world class.
Right? And you were auditioning to get into that. You have an evaluation every year. And in those evaluations, that was really the first time that I started to, and I didn't know it then, but now I look back at it, they would tell me things like, you know, we just need to tame your wild spirit. We just need to reel you in, because ballet is not about being free. At least when they're molding you, it's unnatural. You are pushing your body to do things that your body does not want to do. It's not really made to do. And you're supposed to, it's very authoritative, right? Like an artistic military in a way, can be. Not all teachers are that way, but I think it's the very nature of that art form. So now when I look back at how that time in my life was shaping me, I really feel like, and there would be times when I call my mom and I say, Mom, I wanna quit. I think I'm done with this. And she'd say, think about all the time and work you put into it, and then let's talk about it. And every single time when I think about the 12 years.
Yeah, you got more
14 years that I've been doing it. I feel like,
yeah.
Oh, I don't know that I want to. I'll keep going.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm glad that I did that. But that teenage time was really the time of sacrifice. No prom, no graduation. Right? I left PBA 2 years early to join the trainee program to get into Houston Ballet's company. And when I was 18 and I made that, it was really worth it. I really did. I really felt like I manifested this. And I don't know that I thought about it that way consciously, but I remember thinking, I saw myself, I worked so hard to get this, and it finally happened.
Let me interject a couple of things here. Cleopatra is the first African-American prima ballerina of the Houston Ballet.
Okay, so I'm going to correct him on
You're going to correct me?
Yes, and you know what? I feel honored that you said that. So first, I'm not a prima ballerina. A prima ballerina is someone who is at the very top of their company, and then they go around and they dance for other companies all over the world without even necessarily, like basically other companies.
Free
like
agent.
a contractor, right? That's a prima ballerina. I was in the core of Houston Ballet. What I was the first of, and the only of, is their first and only African-American Clara in their Nutcracker.
In the Nutcracker.
So they've never had, which is like the lead role in the Nutcracker. They've never had a black Clara. However, Lauren Anderson was, and the only, their first principal, black principal, and really one of the first in the nation. So when Misty Copeland, you guys have probably heard of Misty Copeland, right?
Yeah.
When she just made principal, Lauren Anderson was the one, the black woman that you see walking on stage to give her a hug, because here it is, Lauren Anderson from Houston, right? People think of Houston and Texas being so conservative, whereas they had the first
That's
black
excellent.
prima ballerina.
So you were a principal dancer.
I was a core member.
You were a core
but
member.
I would do solo roles. So that brings up a good point. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the levels, right? So you go into the school, into the academy, you audition, you get into the company, and you're an apprentice for a year. And you get paid as an apprentice a little bit. But I mean, it's nice to be getting paid as an 18-year-old, right, to dance. And then if you audition, you make it again, you get into core. And so for my entire 6 years in the company, I stayed in the core, but I was doing soloist roles. So I was always like, I'm doing these soloist roles, but I'm never getting soloists. And that's what Misty hoped. That's why her struggle was so real, because she was doing principal roles as a soloist, but it took her forever to get principal.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
and Lauren Anderson didn't become principal under the boss. That was my boss. She became principal. So I kind of felt like, and other people would tell you maybe I wasn't getting my dues or being recognized as far as getting that title. And definitely, so when I was 21, I got a fracture in my left foot, kept dancing. 3 years later, I feel the same pain in my right foot. And my doctor says, so you have fractures still in both of your feet. Like your left one never healed. How are you've been dancing for 3 years with 2 broken feet? That's the end of your career. And that was devastating, right? I knew that the lifespan of a dancer was short. I just never knew it would be at 26, right? I thought I had longer. And so for a long time, failure is what I felt, right? But here, I had accomplished so much, but all I could see was what I hadn't accomplished. I had never made it to soloist. I was done already at 26, and that took a toll on my mental state, right? I dove into depression. I tried to commit suicide. And that moment is when I learned that I didn't like who I was if I wasn't dancing. Because that had always been my golden ticket, right? And even in my family, like, because I wasn't doing anything else. I was always dancing. Oh, Cleo, she's doing ballet stuff. And so when I didn't have that, I felt like I didn't like anything else. And so it was really the end and the beginning. I feel like the end of my career. Sorry, I'm just babbling.
No, you're not.
Yeah, that was like a huge turning point for me of, I've been doing this thing, and you know what? Sometimes I question if ballet was really what I was supposed to be doing, because I remember saying, you know what, Grandma, I want to try hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And she was like, no, you're going to be a black ballerina, because it had such of a higher standard to it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the idea was you couldn't make any money doing hip hop. Well, today you can make a lot of money doing hip hop. It just wasn't
ballet,
right.
yeah.
It just wasn't known back then. And so I think about the spiritual journey of doing something so constricting that they had to tell me, we need to tame you. And don't get me wrong, I loved it. But so now when I go dance, I love to house dance. And it's just complete improv, and I literally feel like it's my soul communicating, being free. Like if a soul comes down on earth, mine does. It happens when I'm house dancing. And when I do that, I go, oh, I just love to move, and I just happen to be really good at ballet. And not that that means that I regret it, but just that the hardness of ballet, the rigidness of it, the message of it's not enough, has been a spiritual lesson for me, especially as I teach it to kids now. Oh, the last 5 years of feeling like I'm giving those same messages to kids, but having to try and find ways of doing it through love has really been a lot of self-work, like not wanting to not wanting to go over that same thing I went through with them.
Now, are you teaching classical ballet?
I am.
Principally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll teach jazz. And
Uh-huh.
that's the thing. One thing that my mom was really good about was she wanted me to be multifaceted. So I'm one of those people. I think whatever you wanted me to dance, I could learn it. I could pick it up. So that's what I meant. I'm just a mover.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I teach ballet right now. But if my boss, and she'll have me teach a jazz class. She'll have me teaching modern to babies this summer. If she wants me to teach a hip hop class, I'll teach that. So I can teach dance. But primarily, because I dance with the Houston Ballet, I have a skill set that a lot of ballet teachers don't have.
Right.
It's a certain level of teaching classical ballet that can be really hard to come by.
That was a couple of questions. I had a couple of questions around that, or thoughts around that. One is when you say classical dance or classical music, what comes to mind for me is a very narrow range of interpretation. As you were saying, it has to be done just so.
Right.
You can't go off script.
Right.
And so when I listen to like a piece of classical music, and they'll say this cellist's interpretation, this pianist's interpretation, it's very difficult for me to hear the difference from any other recording I've heard of.
Right.
But the expert knows
Right.
that the pianissimos are a little more pianissimo and so on.
Right. Like,
and so that,
absolutely. I can see
Yeah.
a dancer and be like, oh, the way she moves versus her aesthetic. I would be able to tell probably the difference between two dancers and different steps.
but your arm went the same way.
Right, you
It's
were
just-
doing the same
yeah,
line, it's
how
just
was it
how she
extended?
went about it, exactly.
Yeah.
It's different.
That repetition or that replication from performance to performance, like when I think of the Nutcracker, which is what,
30 of them?
19th century, was it?
Oh, that it first
Tchaikovsky,
started?
that it first, yeah. How many thousands of times has this been performed?
I mean, in Houston Ballet, they do 30 shows a year. You do 30 shows between November and the New Year, just alone that company.
So that's amazing. Yeah, well, and they sell out every one, don't
Yeah,
they?
yeah.
So just that commitment to that kind of structure,
Right.
to learn. Also, I've heard musicians, younger and modern musicians of every genre say, if you have a classical background, it's so much of a help.
Right. You can
Like
play
Elton John's new movie, this bio movie's about to come out, and he studied it at the London Conservatory or something, and he had it down in a very rigid and precise sort of way,
Right.
where then he could go
Yes.
off script.
Or Nina Simone. She
Or
was that
Nina
way,
Simone at
right.
the Blue Note.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Like she wanted to be a classical performer, and then that really helped her jazz. And so I really feel that way about my house dance. And so the whole time I was doing ballet, I was a raver. So I'd go to rave parties
Uh-huh.
and dance to house music and party a little too much. And the only way I knew that if I was doing too much is if I couldn't get up and go to ballet class the next day. But that was my release, right? And now when I do it, all of my house friends are like, ooh, you're so graceful. Well, that's my ballet coming into my house dance, right? But it is true when you're teaching kids and they're like, oh, I just want to do hip hop, I just want to do jazz, they want to do ballet, but anyone will tell you your ballet is going to make you better at any other style you want to do because it just gives you body awareness. That's why it's so hard and so great, is it makes you so hyper aware of your body and what you're doing.
Yeah. So often musicians will pick up an instrument. This goes to another thing I wanted to bring up, but they'll pick up an instrument as a kid, they'll start to play, and they get reasonably good at it. Then they make the mistake of taking lessons. And when the first thing they're told when they go in for a lesson is, forget everything you've been doing.
Right.
It's completely all wrong. Here's the structure. Whereas if they'd either not taken the lesson or have taken the lesson first,
Right.
and then been able to branch out from there. You mentioned the availability of things. I was reading about, I think it was in France, there's a fund that some wealthy person set up where in schools the music education is a room full of instruments for a room full of kids. And go on.
Right.
There's no, after that point can come some structure.
Right.
And the horn players go this way and the string players go that way. But before that, it's like just make a racket,
Right.
break a string, dent the horn, do whatever. Don't throw it at somebody. But, if you drop it or whatever, get familiar
Just to
with it.
introduce you,
Yeah,
right.
where it's not this thing that you
Right.
see 100 yards
Right,
away on the
right.
stage.
And that's for them, it's not for you.
Yeah.
And you know what, I will say Houston Ballet has gotten a lot better about that. So after I retired at 26, I moved to New York City to do something completely different because I was so heartbroken. I was like, I don't want anything to do with dance. I'm going to go into business. I'm going to make money. Of course, I hated it because that was out of heartache, right? I
Sure.
made that decision out of heartache. And when I came back here, Houston Ballet had did a really great job of creating an outreach program. And so now they go out to schools, and it's not necessarily they're teaching them ballet, they're just teaching them movement and basically saying you can move. And then if some of them have talent, then they can try out for a program, but they're basically doing exactly what you just said. They're introducing them to it. And then if that interest is there, that talent is there, we're here for you to go and grow it. So I think people are trying that, and I'm really proud of Houston Ballet for doing that and creating that. And actually, if I just started school for midwifery, we'll get to that later, but I'm supposed to be going to schools for Houston Ballet and speaking to them, to kids, and like telling them, I have the time talking to them, because I think it's really important for kids to see an African American woman and say, hey, yeah, so I was a ballerina. And if they don't just see me speaking about it, they put a whole reel of me dancing. And so they get to see me on stage, and they get to, and that was the one thing that I remembered as Clara. We'd have the matinee performances so the schools could come, and other people are dancing on stage, but it wouldn't be until I would come out that I'd hear the kids go, and I knew it was because they were like, there's a black girl on stage. We weren't expecting that.
How wonderful.
That's huge. That's
How
huge.
wonderful.
Yeah, so it feels good to be a part of that, and I think representation is super important.
I can
She
do
looks
that.
like me.
She looks
right?
like me.
The picture of Obama, letting the little boy touch his hair. His hair is like mine. The president's hair is like mine. That's huge.
That is huge.
We don't think that that's huge, but it is huge.
That is. What do you think took so long in the culture for taking the arts, particularly classical arts and fine arts, and making them universally available
Ugh.
in this way?
I don't know if I have like the historical knowledge of that, but I think if you think about who funds the arts, right? Who gives the money? You know, when we go to the Houston Ballet parties and the ambassadors would throw the parties, we would be going into River Oaks houses. You know, and I think that's something that maybe those people feel very much like, well, we are the patrons of the art versus we are the patrons of the art. Let us give. I don't know that way of thinking about their status giving away. I don't know that that's there for everyone. I think I'm glad that it's becoming more that way. But I think it's always been that way in the past, right? Like if you think about, just like you were talking about when they first started this, the rich and the elite went to the operas, and the rich and the elite went to the ballets. So I'm just grateful that it's changing.
I never really understood this. I never really understood this. It dropped suddenly, precipitously. How distinct it was that, like in Europe, in Beethoven's era, let's say, what he was doing, that was not the music of the people. The music of the people was down at the beer halls, you know, and it was the stuff that eventually turned into the popular music that we have today. After going through it became the blues, it became, you know, after going through many iterations and stuff. But it's like there's always been these two languages spoken in the culture of the classical and the common, if you will, or the ordinary. And to see the two of them coming together, where there's a trade-off of artists between the two different genres, and to see it coming to the place where there's no walls, there's no exclusivity about anybody being involved in this.
Right.
I'm grateful to be alive at a time like now, where this is happening.
Me too. When I was telling you about people think of Texas as so conservative. Granted, Ben was British, Ben Stevenson, who was the artistic director of Houston Ballet for over 20-something years. He was one that looked at Houston Ballet like a family. So it was more just like, he would say whenever I'd go into his evaluations, you're a part of this family. And that's the way it felt. So I felt really grateful to be there at a time. And the boss later changed and didn't have that same ideology. And he felt like the best way to get things out of dancers was to have them compete with each other, and he'd speak really harshly, like really actually belittle dancers in front of each other. So it was like a complete, he was a younger guy too, so it was I got to see two different ways of being a leader. Being a leader by love and being a leader by fear in that atmosphere. So I was really grateful to get there when they're both inclusive though. They both wanted to have different looking people. So I'm grateful for that. But also go back to your analogy about music. If you think about modern dance, right? That was kind of the rebel when it came out to ballet.
Absolutely.
Right? And so now you have contemporary, which is modern and ballet together, which I also love choreographing. So that's been another great thing with teaching at my job is I get to choreograph, and I absolutely love making up. I've been doing that since I was little, trying to get my boy cousins, come be in my dance.
Oh, that's great, yeah.
And so the idea now of getting paid to make up dances and that creative process where I hear a song, you love music, and you're like, oh, right? You like, I don't know if you move to it, but you love it. Then I'm like, okay, I get my students, and I'm like, you go stand there, and they are loving learning these steps. And then the show comes, and their parents love watching it, and it's like, I loved creating it, the students loved doing it, the parents loved watching it. And I have, again, just like in house dances, these moments of, this is my soul's purpose.
Yeah.
This is pure creation coming through me. And so I'm really grateful for experiences like that.
When I was a kid growing up in New York, and my family was involved in the arts, and they took me to the New York City Ballet and so on. And they took me to the Dance Theater of Harlem. They took me to the Alvin Ailey Dance Theater. They took me to all of these different dance and music, and that's why I mentioned the Blue Note, Nina Simone, which I didn't get to see her. She was ahead of my time, but she played the Blue Note downtown, and all of the incredible richness of music. And I see this as a world healing. If you can get everyone, how can a rich white patron not realize that if people are singing, dancing, playing musical instruments, everybody's world is better.
Right.
Everybody's got peace in their heart. Let me back up just a moment, if you don't mind, because we went by this kind of quick, and I don't know if everyone's familiar with HSPVA. Tell us what that is, because that's a terrific resource.
Okay, so the HSPVA is the High School for Performing and Visual Arts in Houston. It is the leading performing arts high school, definitely in Houston, maybe in Texas, maybe in part of the nation. I know New York has LaGuardia, which is really big, but like Beyonce went to HSPVA. Robert Glasper, who's a famous jazz musician, went to HSPVA. So a lot of famous musicians and artists went through that high school. It's like Houston's hub of artistry for teenagers. And I've been blessed enough to send my students to that school.
Yeah, that's great.
You know, to teach them and get them ready to go there. So, yeah, it's really great for building great artists.
I have actually known a couple of, I kind of mixed in probably where I wasn't invited, but I've known a couple of families out here in this part of town. I've actually suggested that they move into HISD territory so that they could access that.
People will send fake addresses. I'll just say I'm teaching kids in Pearland and they're getting into HSPVA. So
Portland County,
you basically say you live somewhere you don't.
Yeah.
That's how bad people want to get into this school. That's how important it is if your kid loves the art to try and loves arts to get into that school.
Yeah, that's how good it is. All right, one more thing I'll get out of your way because I want to hear about your presentation too. Just a personal comment. When you mentioned Texas and Houston and the reputation and the progressivity of this and stuff. Years ago, I was in LA for maybe the first time, and I was with some friends who lived there, and they took me out to this Italian place, and they said, they introduced me to the owner. He comes up, a big, kind of typical movie type, covered in flour, He comes over to the table, he says, this is our friend, he says, Jesse, he's from Houston, Texas. Oh, he says, Grand Opera. All he knew about Houston was Houston Grand Opera, and of all the things for people to know about Houston, not the Oilers at the time or the this or this,
barbecue.
Grand Opera. I thought that was really cool.
Though, that's something amazing about Houston is that our arts are really great. But I think it's also because we have oil money, and those are the patrons that give to the art. So as much as we're like, oh, rich people, they are what make the art so amazing. And I think it's up to the people who are running those institutions to say, which they are doing, Houston Ballet, we're getting all of these wonderful resources from these people that can pay us. Let us give, right? Maybe it's not up to the patrons. It's up to the institutions to say, okay, the patrons, they give us their funds and we keep what we need, but we also give back. And I think that's what they're trying to do.
And the National Endowment for the Arts, if you don't mind me saying so. Yes. In her Heartfelt Living is a class we offer here. It's the entry class really into our work of creative life. It's a 10-week class. At the time Cleo took it, we divided it into 2 5-week segments. Works better really as 10 all the way through, so that's how we're going to style it. And at the end of the thing, people create a project, what they've gotten from the class, what they've learned about themselves, their own spiritual path and development going through the 10 weeks. And this was Cleo's, which I asked her to bring tonight and present to you because it was stunning on a number of levels. And so, would you mind narrating this for us?
I would. Thank you, by the way. I first want to give some backstory as to why I chose this topic. So as I was saying, I always said I never wanted to teach dance, and yet somehow I feel like they say don't say never. A lot of times when I say never to things, they end up coming into my life, I think, to teach me. And one of my biggest lessons, was to learn how to teach kids something that I think had a lot of pain and different messages wrapped around, and trying to teach it through love. But I still got to the point to where I was like, I know I'm supposed to be doing more. And what my more has turned into is I want to become a midwife. I actually want to become a minister midwife. I'm working on the midwife part right now, but I eventually want to come back and become a minister. And as I started learning the information about what's going on, I'm not going to say what's going on because it makes it seem like it's just happening right now. It's been going on for decades. It's just now the media is talking about it. Black women have been dying in birth for decades, right? And so as I started to learn about that, and I started to ask my aunts about their birth stories, I started to get really passionate. As a 36-year-old woman who's African American, wants to have babies, I started to learn, and I started to say, instead of getting angry, what can I do? And so part of it is I want to become a midwife. I became a doula, so midwife is the next step. But also, I wanted to see how I could merge my spiritual lessons and growth with helping these women. So it's my belief that every person wants to be happy and healthy, and that every mother desires to have a healthy baby. Go ahead. So this is going to give you some information about what's going on with black women. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. That's huge. Babies are twice likely, black babies are twice likely to die than their white counterparts. I'm going to tell you. The black pregnant women are more likely to experience low birth weight babies in early term pregnancies. And research shows these numbers, they cut across class. So there is Beyonce just did a special, Serena just did a special. They both almost died in birth. These are the richest, most powerful black women in America, and yet they are almost dying while they're pregnant. Right? So I'm making this point to say, most people would say, oh, it's because they're poor, it's because they don't have access. No, 2 of the richest black women almost died in birth as well. The reasons why, it's due to chronic toxic physiological stress. So studies show that basically living in America is unhealthy for Black women. And it kills our babies. It stresses us out more than white women and Black men because we have the double, right? We're women and we're Black. So we're more likely to be stressed out, and our bodies don't handle it the best way. It creates hypertension, that stress, preeclampsia, and it leads to higher rates of infant and maternal death. On top of that, when Black women say, I don't feel well, they are looked at by healthcare providers as to be complaining, right? Whereas white women say something is not right, they are heard, they are listened to. And Serena's special, she continuously says something is not right. Serena Williams, something is not right. She had a blood clot in her lung. She almost died. So, One Nation Under Stress is actually a documentary on HBO, and it talks about how stress is affecting white Americans. And I put this in here because as I was learning about how stress is affecting Black women, I was really interested to see what they had to say about stress affecting white people, and if they mentioned black women or Black women. But they say how it is affecting white people or white people is they're more likely to die of suicide, opioid overdoses, and alcoholism. But they also they define stress as a lack of control and uncertainty. It shows that your health is directly connected to your status in society, right? The worse off you are, the unhealthier you are. And it changes your brain. Stress actually changes your brain. And so there's one little tidbit about African Americans, because this special was about white people, was, well, African Americans have historically been in a state of chronic stress. Like, we know this, whereas it's newer for white people. And that African Americans' life expectancy is 3.5 years shorter. They list things that would help with stress. So mindfulness and meditation. We know about these things because we practice them here. Community and strong social relationships. So Hispanics live longer than Blacks and whites because of how strong their families are, right? Stress hormones impair our ability to be empathic, right? So the more stressed out we are, the less able we are to show empathy to each other. And a doctor that's in the documentary says that when he looks at Americans, when he goes to poor countries, they're dealing with a lot of the same things, but here we have no hope. And I found that really interesting. The richest country, and we don't have hope, but when he goes to poorer countries, he feels like they have hope there. So Biology of Belief was a book. I love Bruce Lipton. He is a research scientist, but he's also a very spiritual person. And he basically shows how when a baby is in utero, it is affected by its parents, right? So you can if a mom or dad, it makes a difference whether we are conceived in love, haste, or hate, and whether a mother wants to be pregnant, right? So a baby is feeling that stress. And scientific evidence, it says that we have to reevaluate what babies are feeling and sensing while they're in utero. We know now that awake or asleep, studies show unborn children are constantly tuned in to their mother's every action, thought, and feeling. From the moment of conception, the experience in the womb shapes the brain and lays the groundwork for personality, emotional temperament, and the power of higher thought. So the more stressed out mom is, the less likely baby is going to come out and feel like it can feel safe and it can think in higher and different ways. So when passing through the placenta, there are hormones that are telling baby it's not good out here. It's really bad out here, right? And it's preparing the baby for what's to come. Cortisol, the stress hormone, it's going to the baby and it's affecting its growth state, it's making it smaller. That's why the babies are being born smaller. It makes it in a protective state versus being calm and having the love oxytocin hormone. It puts you more in an expansion state, and babies then grow in that. Low birth babies go on to develop health issues as adults. And so, like I said before, nature is preparing the child to best survive the environment it will encounter after birth by allowing information from the parent's perception of their environment to transfer through the placenta and prime baby's physiology. So if mom feels like she's not safe, she's telling baby subconsciously it's not safe out here. So perception equals personal solutions. While we can't personally get rid of societal, systemic, institutional, and structural racism, what can we do? This is where science of mind comes in. Armed with the latest science, parents have a choice. They can carefully reprogram their limiting beliefs about life before bringing a child into the world. I thought this quote was really important. No matter how good one's genes may be, if an individual's nurture experience are fraught with abuse, neglect, or misperceptions, the realization of the gene's potential will be sabotaged. So no matter how, if you're a little Mozart, right?
Yeah.
Your genes make you say that you can be brilliant and a genius. If your mom is scared and abused, maybe not eating well, you will never see that Mozart when that baby is born, because its whole physiology has been changed by that stress. So Ernest Holmes, I love listening to him on YouTube. I listened to one of his recordings that said there are 3 things that we as humans need. We need to feel needed, wanted, and loved. We need to feel we belong to the universe in which we live. We need to have something upon which to lavish our affection. So I took these 3 great needs and I said, how can these help Black pregnant women who are stressed out? You know, so I feel they need to learn. So that's my dream is to have this birth center where they're having healthy babies. My midwife idol, Jenny Joseph, in Florida, has a birthing center where she has lowered the numbers of babies being born with low birth weight. She's been doing it since before this information came out, right? Now it's like the new information. She's been doing it for decades, saving these women. The thing though is, after they have the baby, they're going back into the same situations that cause stress. And so my question is, what do I do in my birth center? I want there to be a spiritual center there as well, so that they are learning while they're pregnant. This is what you do when you go home after baby is born. You know that your God experiencing life is you. God loves you. You're strongly wished for. Asking them what's their concept of God. When was the last time you felt the happiest, the most connected to self and others, when you feel understood and accepted? Basically trying to give a new idea of what God feels like. I often feel, for me, for a while, my Christian background made me feel like God was very judgmental, and it was very hard for me to feel loved when I saw it from that way. So maybe expanding our idea of what God looks like, what it feels like, introducing the idea of God as energy. And the fundamental reality of life, oneness. God is all. Forgiveness and self-love, healing wounds from Black experience in America. I don't think we should try and sweep that under the rug. I think there is a long history of what African Americans, our ancestors, have gone through, and I think there's a lot of healing and forgiving, I think on both sides, right? Not just as slaves and as African Americans, but even as Caucasians, peoples, your ancestors being slave owners. Like you guys are healing as well as we're healing. We're all healing from that. How do we help them feel they belong to the universe? Explain the creative process. Our thoughts create our reality. Using affirmations, meditation, affirmative prayer, and visualizations. Deep breathing. Understanding, listening, and asking. These are all lessons I learned in my Heartfelt Living class. Using abundance and gratitude. Seeing abundance and gratitude. Stats about life that show intention, perfection, intelligence. I like reading about scientific things, so sometimes hearing how the earth is rotating, and if it was just this far away, we'd burn up. That makes me see the perfection of everything. And so maybe for someone who isn't so religious or spiritual, giving them some insight into the perfection and the of us.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
What was the video you recommended?
Oh,
This-
it's a documentary. It's from it's Will Smith that's narrating. It's called This Strange Rock.
This Strange Rock.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. It has some amazing facts about the earth that really make it seem like if this one little thing hadn't happened, we wouldn't have water on Earth.
Yeah.
If this one little thing didn't happen, the sun would fry us, and it just really shows how blessed we are to be here. Wholeness versus lack, that's huge, right? I feel you look at the epigenics of being African American. There's a lot being taken away from your home. We gotta find a way to feel whole versus lack. Understanding why we have to desire love in the first place. This is feeling we have something to give our affection, right? After we realize that we have a relationship with God, we belong to the universe, how can we give our affection? God living as us and loving as us. Sacred giving and sacred service. Celebrating life. I love that song that was here. Infant, so these are tools that I learned as a doula that a mom could use. Infant massage to be intimate with her baby and be giving that affection. Breastfeeding, obviously, a lot of black women, the numbers for breastfeeding are a lot lower. Speaking affirmative prayers over ourselves and our babies. So new perceptions. If stress equals a lack of control and uncertainty, then heartfelt living equals control over our reactions so that the things we can't control, and certainty in our connections with and belonging to this thing called life. So I really feel like that, on top of helping moms having healthy babies, would give them something to really connect them to their source. And hopefully help them with their stress. I know coming to this place helps me with my stress. So that was my project.
And that's your ministry, yeah. Well done. How are we for time?
8:08.
8:08, we should probably be in. Well, this is what we saw, what you saw, and we talked about and offered all of us in that room at that time our support for Cleo's vision and her ministry and that birthing center, and beyond that, to reshape this world in a way that really does work for everyone, where there is equity and there is justice, there is true peace. So, I'm trying to think, I had a thought occur, another question, but it's not coming to me right now. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Just that I'm grateful to everyone that is sitting here listening, receiving. I think that sometimes is not the most fun stuff to hear, the truth of the disparity. But I'm really honored that you wanted that you thought it was important for other people to hear, and I love that about you.
Thank you.
And so I'm just grateful to everyone having open ears and open hearts.
Yeah, you know this. We're serious. We're serious, and whatever it takes to heal this world is whatever it takes to heal this world. No job is too big. So if we're uncomfortable, and if we have to look at our families or our ethnicity and our background and our complicity in things, or especially as I'm most taken with these days, the idea of what's the word? Micro oppression, how today, when an African American woman, who is not you, of this center tells me, or I overhear a conversation, actually, it's not being hidden from me, I walk in on it. 2 African American women in this congregation telling me a story about how in a department store they can't get waited on. They get followed around. And microaggression yet. And I'm thinking, today? I don't see that. I wouldn't know that if I hadn't heard that. If I didn't go seek out that information, or somebody felt safe enough to share it with me. I am shocked and appalled. And it's just the tip of the iceberg for what else is going on today, when people like me tend to think that somewhere around 1969, maybe everything sort of changed.
Right.
You know, when Jim Crow laws went away and water fountains weren't separate anymore and stuff like this in this part of the country, you know, that, well, things began to heal and get normal. And today there's still this disparity and still this craziness. I've got to stay alert to that in order to be able to do anything about it. So, again, thank you. And I'm Cleopatra Williams. Lynn Ripplemeyer wanted to be here tonight, by the way, and I told Cleo this. Lynn was a subject of one of these conversations before, and I've got some ideas in mind for who we'll have coming up, and I'd love to have you back to talk about this. Maybe we'll get a whole stage full of people and have a big conversation, so we'll figure it out. Anyway, that's what we have for you tonight. So would you like to, how shall we close with this group? Get in a big old circle like we do?
Thanks.